I'm Sarah Lacy.
And I'm Paul Carr.
And welcome to Too Long Didn't Watch, the show that takes you outside the Silicon Valley echo chamber.
Into an echoey studio. We're here, we have a studio guest this week, exciting times. We're here with...
We brought someone into the echo chamber.
We're here with Julio Vasconcellos, is that right? From Peixe Urbano. Tell me that I pronounced any of those words correctly.
That was actually perfect. I think.
Oh, well, look at that. My Portuguese is, that's, I would say it was good in Portuguese, but I don't even know what the word for good is in Portuguese. So
your site is one of these million Groupon knockoffs around the world, right? Is there anything unique that Peixe Urbano does for the Brazilian market?
Yeah, I mean, we were the first daily deal site in Brazil, and actually the way that we built the site and catered the deals were actually specific to the Brazilian audience. So the mix of deals that we have is very specific to Brazil. We have a lot of events, have a lot of happy hours, a lot of things that cater to the spontaneous culture. Mm-hmm. And it's actually some of the things that we're going to be launching the next couple of months are actually going to start going into sort of additional things that are not just in the daily deal space, but more helping people find out what the best stuff to do in their city is.
Things like what? Break some news for us.
Well, there's a couple of things that we want to do in terms of loyalty programs. Mm-hmm. So we definitely want to help people start getting rewarded for being loyal to a business, as well as for businesses that particularly give good care, let's say, for users, letting them have certain rewards and being rewarded for that kind of behavior.
So you're edging into a Foursquare area a little bit?
like everyone is.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really say Foursquare because we're not really working off of this check-in model. But I would say more of like a frequent flyer model meets the local space.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the only one of the three of us who's never been to Brazil, so that's why I've earned my place in this.
Good luck getting a visa.
Yeah,
Let me just tell
exactly.
you right up
Apparently there are visa problems and death threats. But what I do know about Brazil is I was reading, in fact, on TechCrunch, I guess recently, Lena wrote a post. Studies are saying that while the US venture capital industry is going to not necessarily decline, but there aren't going to be more funds opening. In Brazil, things are on the up. Explain to those who, like me, don't know anything about Brazil, what the environment's like there.
And I think, just to jump in, I think the thing that was surprising about that study is we hear so much about venture capital really increasing in China and India, but when you travel to Brazil, when you travel to parts of Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, even Russia, these other huge markets everyone talks about, you just don't see a lot of American venture capital there, particularly Silicon Valley venture capital, and it's hard for these ecosystems to grow on their own. So, it was interesting that Brazil was kind of bubbled up near the top of that study. So what is the 50,000-foot view? I think you have to equate it to what China was like 10, 15 years ago, right? If you went to China 15 years ago, you probably wouldn't have seen a lot of US venture capitalists there. And I think what people are looking for now is sort of what's the next China and can I be there in the beginning? I think the Brazilian economy is just booming, and specifically the online space. If you look at internet penetration, it's increased 75% in the last 3 years, which is almost doubling of the internet population. That was already 30 million people, is now almost 70 million people on the internet.
And it's funny you say China, because of course when people think, or when a lot of, especially Westerners think of China, they think copycats. They think of they just take our internet sites and copy them. And that seems to be, Brazil has that sense, there was the Groupon.
Specifically you.
Yeah, well, Sarah jokingly introduced you as a Groupon clone, but is that a thing? Are there original ideas coming out from Brazil? Not, you're saying you put a Brazilian spin on what is, though, clearly an American company, sort of concept. What original things are coming out of Brazil? What's a typically Brazilian?
Yeah, I would actually go back a little bit to the China comics. I think maybe China started a little bit more in this sort of let's copy a business model and then build from there, which is actually the way I think Brazil is a lot right now.
Well, China really copied features and built out totally unique business models and distribution. It was more
totally. So I would say the stuff that's coming out of China today is very innovative. I think Brazil might be a little less innovative on that side, but there's still a ton of great companies coming out of Brazil. I think there's a company, Videolog, you might have met down there, which was actually a video site on the internet before there was a huge video boom here in the US. So there were YouTube 2 years before YouTube came out. So there's actually a lot of innovations coming out of Brazil. It doesn't really make it to the global stage, perhaps because there's not enough funding and there's not enough ability to get it out there. Well, I think that's going to start changing. We're going to start seeing more of innovation coming out of Brazil.
Well, and also, is Portuguese a advantage, disadvantage? Because in India, people think one reason that a lot of consumer internet companies have not developed is because most of the people on the web just speak English. So there's not the same need for it the way there was in China in the early days. But China also had 400 million people online. Sure. So starting a Chinese language only site still has a huge audience. With Portuguese, you're maybe a little bit more protected than a Spanish-speaking South American country may be starting a site. But on the other hand, you also don't have a huge, Portuguese-speaking part of the world that site can be delivered to.
I mean, that's true, but there's nothing really keeping Brazilians or Portuguese speakers developing sites that are multilingual, right? In the same way that Facebook and Twitter now are translated into multiple languages, there's no reason why that can't come out of Brazil. Specifically, I think when you look abroad and the number of people that speak other languages, specifically English, is so high, especially when you start looking at people that are working at startups and running startups, they're mostly fluent in English and they can build the same product and just localize it to English.
We want to ask you about this weird Groupon story that came out of Brazil a couple weeks ago. There was one of these I guess one of your competitors had some fake deals and they were partnering with Groupon and people were kind of like, what's going on here? Was
Didn't
that a
Groupon
scam?
buy them? I thought they were
What was the deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the relationship is between the two companies. I know that that's sort of the way that Groupon entered into the market. I actually saw it on TechCrunch.
the number one source of technology news
In Brazil.
FTW.
So, I mean, I think that's actually how they launched in Brazil. I think it was a little bit of a sort of miscommunication internally there.
It's probably the language thing.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the language thing.
Unfortunately, the Portuguese word for scam is the same as the
is
Portuguese
this
word
something
for...
that, as Silicon Valley, as web companies start to look more at this kind of juicy Portuguese market, they need to be aware of?
Well, I think that it's something that companies coming from the US and Europe need to be wary of. I think oftentimes the mentality is that it's a little bit of a Wild West and sort of anything goes. So, I don't know exactly what the details of that were, but let's say Groupon decided to go into Brazil and figure that it was fine to arrive with fake deals, which is what happened, which is something you would never do in the US.
In their defense, I think they say they were placeholder deals. I think they say that you couldn't actually, it wasn't like you could buy the deal.
I say it's still shady, and we've got to leave it at that.
I think it's definitely shady. Brazil is shady, let's leave it there.
Thank you, Julio, for joining us.
Thank you,
Anytime
guys.
you're in the country, stop by, and we'll just stop by your house next time we're in Rio.
Thank you.